Another wild encounter. "35,000 of them in the whole of Asia. That's all that's left. Their numbers are decreasing every day. They're vanishing despite the fact they're revered in religious life. The Hindu god Ganesh even has the head of an elephant. Desperate last-minute measures are being taken to preserve what's left. In Sri Lanka, a whole herd of elephants has been darted and moved to safety. We'll take part in that hazardous operation. Not long ago, thousands of Asian elephants were tamed for logging work in the forests. Now there are so few elephants left in the wild in India that the government has banned further catching. Cameras rode with the catchers to record the very last roundup of all, a phrase that sums up the plight of the Asian elephant. Although it's the animal most people are familiar with from circuses, the Asian elephant is very seldom filmed in the wild. Wildlife films and television usually feature the African elephant, like this one, a slightly bigger animal with far bigger ears and more likely to carry big ivory. The Asian elephant has a much more domed forehead. The ears are comparatively insignificant. Head-on, there's no mistaking the bulk of the African species. There's a small difference in the trunk, too. The African has two prehensile lips at the tip. The Asian, only one. With the Asian elephant, Elephas maximus, only the bulls carry tusks. It's very rare to find a big tusker, probably because big ivory was shot out long ago. Asian elephants have been captured and trained for hunting, ceremonial and work for at least 3,000 years. Indian rulers, especially the Mughal emperors, put them into their battle line. So did more recent military commanders. Elephants were used as recently as World War II in the Burma campaign to carry ammunition. Within modern times, elephants in India were still numerous enough occasionally to derail a train. Some Maharajas had over 1,000 elephants at their disposal, a number of which were trained to take part in fighting displays. This archive film was shot as recently as 1934 in Jaipur state. Rather like some disappointed boxer, the loser doesn't take defeat in the ring too kindly. On ceremonial occasions, an Indian princeling could rely on an impressive turnout of elephants. There were plenty more in the wild where those came from. The Maharaja of Patiala's eldest son certainly wasn't short of elephants at his wedding in 1936. His crown is all diamonds. As to the wedding coach, what else would it be drawn by but elephants? What these scenes reflect is how large the wild population must have been to provide as many elephants as even a Maharaja could wish for. But the picture has sadly changed. 100 years ago, the Asian elephant's range was far, far larger. It was found right across the east, from Iraq to China. Today, these are the isolated pockets in which the Asian elephant lingers on. A world total optimistically put at 35,000. One of the more populated pockets is in the Indian state of Assam, close to the Burmese border. And that's where the last authorized roundup of wild elephants took place. There may be as many as 4,000 left in this region. The question is often asked, why is it always the Asian elephant that is taken out of the wild and put to work for man? Why not the African? Certainly the two species seem to behave in much the same way in the wild state. There's no real evidence to support the idea that the Asian elephant is more docile and more easily tamed. Until recently, there was a successful African elephant training center in Zaire. So perhaps it's just a question of opportunity. In Asia, there are forests in which the elephant has proved an ideal working aid. Religious and ceremonial life is more formal and developed than in Africa, and the elephant makes an ideally impressive addition to a state or religious occasion. Nevertheless, the impression lingers on that the Asian elephant is more easily tamed. Joining the last roundup in Assam will show just how easily. One of the tribes that specializes in catching wild elephants is called the Singpo. Their ancestors have been capturing elephants by the same traditional methods for several thousand years. There are two basic techniques: the kedda, in which elephants are driven across country into a stockade, and the mela shikar, when the herd is pursued on elephant back, the calves separated and roped. Both are dangerous. Before the catch can take place, it's necessary to build a camp in the jungle. The kunkis, or tame elephants who will be used in the catching, do all the lifting and carrying. Their calves go everywhere with them. The trade of elephant catching is handed down from father to son. Now it will probably die out. The striped jacket is the proud uniform of a Singpo elephant catcher. At dawn, the catching elephants are loaded up with the gear. All the ropes are hand-woven by the team. Reconnaissance over the past few days has shown that there's a wild herd with calves very close by. An extraordinary feature of the mela is the way the wild elephants appear to be lulled into false security by the presence of the tame ones, even when they're being chased by them. Right in close to the herd now, the catchers throw a lasso, but miss. The chase takes the catchers out of the open country of elephant grass and back into the forest. And there, at last, they separate the calf. Securely roped, the calf is led back to the training camp. Using the mela method, only young elephants can be captured. It would be virtually impossible to rope a fully grown beast weighing 6 tons. The kedda method is something different. This is the keddah itself, or stockade. It looks too flimsy to hold a herd of angry captives, but the springiness of the walls is backed up by solid timber supports. The principle is that it gives but doesn't break. The drive towards the keddah starts in late afternoon. The thunder flashes and beaters are driving the herd towards the long open wings of the stockade. By the time the herd is close to the opening of the keddah, it will be too late to turn back. The noise behind persuades them to keep going on, and now dusk is falling so that the funneling walls of the stockade will be concealed. By the time the moon is up, there are a dozen furious elephants inside the keddah. Fire is a vital element in keeping them there. Without a ring of intimidating fires immediately outside the stockade, the captured herd might easily succeed in smashing its way out. Next morning, the catching team is exhausted. Not so the elephants. They're as fresh as ever. The herd is in a dangerous mood and unlikely to calm down. Nevertheless, the head of the catching team tells his men to mount up. The next step in the keddah is actually to ride in among the captured herd. It's an awesome moment. The first objective must always be to rope the calves. In the confusion and stampede, there's a danger that they may be crushed. Quite unbelievably, the wild elephants accept the tame intruders and make no attempt to attack the riders. There's a bit of pushing and shoving, but no real violence. It would be easy to grasp one of the men with an upstretched trunk, but the thought never seems to occur. A cow is pushed out of the way so that a rope can be got onto her calf. In half an hour, without a casualty to man or elephant, it's all over. The keddah is complete. Now the training can begin. It's 8 miles to the Singpo's training camp. Tethered like a chain gang between the kunkis, the captives go quietly. It's almost as if they'd never been wild elephants. On their way, they pass the handiwork of their real enemy in life, the tree feller. It is the destruction of forests all over the Far East, more than any other single factor, that has depleted the numbers of Asian elephants. That and the continual growth and spread of the human population. These things, rather than hunting or capture, have put the Asian elephant on the endangered list. The kunkis maneuver a captive into position. They're acting rather like jailers. For the first 2 days, the prisoners will have to be tied down. If the initial stages of training aren't exactly kind, they aren't too cruel either. At the very least, the Singpos aren't going to mark their captives with rope burns, if only because they're worth about 10,000 rupees each. That's about 700 pounds. The elephants have to be persuaded to accept man, and there's no way they're going to do that if they're running around loose. Conservationists see nothing against the use of elephants for work in forestry. They may be influenced by the fact that if there are going to be any working elephants in the future, there's got to be a healthy wild stock to supply them. Asian elephants don't readily breed in captivity. In fairness to the Singpos, they show a high regard for both the tame and wild elephants. Those are the buyers deciding how much they're prepared to bid. They'll be able to take their elephants away, partly trained, within a fortnight. At last, all the captives are tied down for their 2 sad but essential days of solitary confinement. Soon after comes another crucial stage in the training process. It takes place at night and might be called ordeal by fire, since fire subdues the elephants. It might also be called ordeal by song, though the singing is said to have a soothing effect. Under these dual influences, the elephants get used to being touched and even tapped with a stick. After that, they can be taken out in daylight on the parade ground to learn the basic commands their mahouts will give them. Halt. Reverse. The kunkis on either side act as guides. Forward. Turn right. The mahout reinforces the command each time with leg pressure, just as if riding a horse. And here, 6 months after capture, is a working elephant. These logs weigh at least 2 tons. It's hard to say whether or not Asian elephants enjoy working. It probably depends on the mahout, and most mahouts, though sadly not all, value their elephants too highly to ill-treat them. What is certain is that there is a place for working elephants, especially in mountainous regions and over difficult terrain where machinery can't easily operate. Elephants are highly efficient. They feed on the vegetation knocked over during logging. Just occasionally, they get a chance to show a machine who's boss. Wherever it still exists, the Asian elephant is in direct conflict with the growing human population. Its forest home is being destroyed. Confined in smaller and smaller areas, the elephant has no choice but to invade places now cultivated by man. Here, forest is being cleared by the quickest possible method. These scenes could have been filmed almost anywhere in Asia. After the fire has gone out, bare, desolate earth remains that may produce crops for a few years. The need to feed Asia's enormous population is, of course, the driving force. But all too often, the destruction of forest is unplanned. As a result, erosion sets in. Dams intended to irrigate the newly cleared land silt up within a few years. Even the climate can be changed by wholesale destruction of forest. The elephants are among the incidental victims. They not only require a great deal of food, around 600 pounds per day, but they need a very large habitat. In the dry season, for instance, the leaves wither and fall in a deciduous forest like this. So the elephants move, or rather used to move, to an evergreen forest or an area of grassland. Now the opportunity no longer exists. One of the real hopes for the Asian elephant lies at the southernmost tip of the Indian subcontinent on the island of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has population problems like anywhere else, but is trying to find a way to solve them. There are between 3,000 and 4,000 elephants in an island only 270 miles long by 130 miles wide. 100 years ago, there were 12,000 elephants here. That was before the British planters started shooting for sport and to protect tea and coffee estates in the hills. As a result, elephants only survived in the less fertile, dry lowlands. Lately, however, these areas have been increasingly developed for agriculture, with the result that Sri Lanka has a number of what are called pocketed herds. Here at Duduru Oya, a once 150-strong herd of elephants has been reduced to 17, isolated amid plantations. They lie up in cover during the day and come out raiding the coconut palms at night. Sometimes, if they feel like a meal of palm fronds, the elephants don't even wait for darkness. The depredations of pocketed herds like the one at Duduru Oya required urgent action. A team that would have to depend on the bushcraft and coolness of the Sri Lankan rangers was set up to tackle the problem. No one had ever successfully moved a fully grown elephant herd before. Where pocketed herds exist in Africa, it has been necessary to shoot all the adults, and only the calves have been saved. But in Sri Lanka, the wildlife authorities had one of the world's most experienced capture experts, Dr. Ian Hofmeyer, veterinary officer of the Etosha National Park, Namibia, who gave his services voluntarily. Darting in dense scrub jungle was more hazardous than anything Hofmeyer had encountered in Africa. Visibility was seldom more than 10 yards. He was using a new Belgian drug called carfentanil. The first elephant was peacefully asleep within minutes of the dart striking. The white scar is a bullet wound. This first cow was no exception. Every single one of the 10 animals eventually saved had been peppered with shot. It's easy to blame the local farmers and villagers, but the responsibility really lies with the authorities who allowed piecemeal agricultural development in earlier years. Now in Sri Lanka, development is planned to minimize conflict with wildlife. The Wildlife Department has its own elephant team led by Ainsley Fernando. The most available weapon to defend crops is almost always a shotgun, firing large slugs which wound rather than kill and set up festering sores. Dr. Netasinghe, head of the Sri Lankan veterinary team, treats the wounds with antibiotics as soon as the lead has been removed. Of the 10 darted elephants, 5 had been blinded in one eye. After the first darting success, Hofmeyer toasts Mr. Pereira, Assistant Wildlife Director, in King Coconut Milk. Not all dartings went as smoothly as the first. One morning the team went after a big tusker. The tusker charged, running down cameraman Dieter Plager, who managed to roll clear, leaving his camera still running. Not all the disasters were on the human side. The villagers demanded that 2 rogue elephants be removed. They'd been shot at so often that they were ready to kill on sight. The team approached the first bull with special caution. Hofmeyer fired his dart. When the rogue bull disappeared into thick cover, thunder flashes were used to drive away the rest of the herd. The dart had struck successfully, but success this time ended there. No wonder the bull had turned a man-killer. Not only was he riddled with buckshot, but he was blind in both eyes. There was nothing to do but put him out of his misery. The team had an untried weapon which, for the first time in the history of wildlife conservation, made possible the movement of an entire group of elephants weighing up to 5 tons each. This is the weapon, a trained elephant. The darted elephant has been given a tranquilizer. But how do you persuade a fully grown elephant to go where you want it to? The trained or monitor elephants provide some friendly persuasion. One initial difficulty was that the mahouts controlling the monitor elephants didn't trust the effectiveness of the drugs. At first they were reluctant to work closely enough, but gradually their confidence increased. As with the capture of the wild elephants in the Keddah, the presence of trained animals calms things down. It's the monitor elephants as much as the tranquilizer which make the operation possible. The coconut palms are part of a plantation that has had to be abandoned due to constant raiding by the elephant herd. Soon the plantation will be productive again. The captured elephants will be moved 70 miles by road to Wilpattu, one of Sri Lanka's 5 national parks. A measure of the team's success is that the elephant is ready to eat even while tranquilized. As more elephants are brought in for their journey to Wilpattu, the size of Sri Lanka's problem becomes obvious. People appear from all directions. They all live nearby. And people and elephants just do not and cannot mix. People, especially hungry people, will always come first. But Sri Lanka feels that it has a chance, with good planning, of including most of its present stock of elephants in its design for living. Now the part of the operation that would be unthinkable without the help of the monitor elephants. The problem, to persuade an adult wild elephant to get into the back of a lorry. Eventually the problem is solved. The elephant is aboard, tied up and happily eating. The journey to Wilpattu National Park can take from 3 to 5 hours according to the weather. Frequent stops are made to check on the load and to inject more tranquilizer when necessary. The monsoon is just beginning. There are typical pre-monsoon cloudbursts. The release area in Wilpattu is well into the center of the park. On the way, another storm hit them, turning the track into a slippery paste. Lind Alwis, then director of Sri Lanka's parks, promoted and masterminded the operation. Indeed, the whole future of Sri Lanka's elephants is his concern. In this, fortunately, he's backed by both Sri Lanka's president and the premier. It has been decided to make the first release at night in the hope that the elephant won't immediately wander too far in strange surroundings. First, Hofmeyr gives it a very small dose of the immobilizing drug, and then the team guides it out with ropes onto the unloading ramp. Once it's asleep, the ropes are removed. A final shot of antidote into the ear. And then it's time for a prudent withdrawal. The number 1 inscribed on the elephant's backside in hard gloss paint will enable the parks to keep a check on its movements for quite a long time. They say that an elephant never forgets. One cow certainly didn't. She remembered where she'd come from and walked back 50 miles across country in 4 days to the forest where Ian Hofmeyr had darted her. And there she did her best to kill him, charging and nearly running him down. He believes she returned to look for her calf, which was sickly and had been taken after capture to Colombo Zoo for treatment. Number 10, the last one, is given its markings and its freedom. There can be no more catching for a while. The monsoon has finally broken. The arrival of the monsoon rain is a joyous time for Sri Lanka's elephants. Following the monsoon, there's limitless grass and green stuff and everything good to eat. Watching these scenes, it's easy to forget that the Asian elephant has a problem. The problem simply of survival. In Sri Lanka, elephants probably have a better chance than anywhere else. And not just because of a few spectacular rescue operations. 12% of this small country consists of national parks and reserves, and that's remarkable in overpopulated Asia. Though a huge clearance scheme for agriculture is underway, forest corridors for elephant movement between parks are being left intact and will be fully protected. If any further argument is needed to persuade the world that the Asian elephant cannot be allowed to disappear by default, then these scenes of a family herd bathing in Yala National Park, Sri Lanka, ought surely to be eloquent enough. Every August full moon in the city of Kandy, ancient capital of the Sinhalese kings, there takes place a ceremony called the Perahera. Perahera simply means procession. But this must be one of the most spectacular processions on earth. And what makes it so is the splendor of the 100 richly caparisoned elephants which take part. The most spectacular elephant of all is the giant tusker Raja, who carries on his back the sacred tooth relic of the Lord Buddha. The tusker leaves the temple and stalks through the streets of Kandy while acolytes unroll a white silken carpet for the great elephant to walk on. The Kandy Perahera represents 3,000 years of Eastern culture and religious life in which the Asian elephant has played a continuous and central part. It's impossible to watch the splendor of this ceremony without asking whether we are within sight of its disappearance. What would the Perahera be without its elephants? The president of Sri Lanka stands and pays his respects as the tusker passes. The elephants in the Perahera all came from the same place originally, from the wild. Asian elephants seldom breed in captivity. The question is, how much longer will they continue to live and breed in the jungles of Asia? For the record, this is the most optimistic view of the numbers that the world has left. India and Sri Lanka, 15,000. The mainland of Southeast Asia, 17,000. The islands of Southeast Asia, 13,000. It may sound a lot, but spread over that huge area, it still may not be enough to guarantee the Asian elephant's survival.